Hi, my name is Bob Hill, and I'm the president of the Church of Scientology Mission of Riverdale at 308 Broadview Avenue in Toronto. Today's Sunday service, surprisingly enough, is on the principle of right and wrong. When making a decision about something, do you ever wonder what is right and what is wrong? Well, today's sermon, it's based on the writings by L. Ron Hubbard in the book, The Introduction to Scientology Ethics. Now, before I get into the main sermon, it's important to break down and understand what the different areas in life are that one is seeking to survive in. These are called dynamics. Now, a dynamic is an urge or a thrust or a motivation. In Scientology, we break it down into 8 parts. The first of these dynamics is the urge to survive, or the action of surviving as yourself, who you are, your character, your basic personality, taking care of your body, etc. That's the first dynamic. The second dynamic, or second urge to survive, is called the sex or family dynamic. In this particular dynamic, there's an urge to create and to raise a family, to have a partner in marriage, and so on. That's the second dynamic. The third dynamic, third area that one looks to survive, and you're probably all familiar with this, is the group dynamic. You want to be part of a team, or the people that you work with, or your church, your government is a third dynamic, your country is a third dynamic, and you are part of it. Sometimes it's difficult to survive in all these particular dynamics, but one is attempting to survive. Now, the fourth dynamic, if you put all the groups together, you get mankind. And, we've seen people pulling back from that dynamic recently with what's going on the planet and so on. But there is an urge to survive as part of mankind, and it's a noble cause to try and help mankind. The fifth dynamic is your plant and animal kingdom. That includes insects to the largest creatures there are, your whales, and all the animals and plants that you see around. That's the fifth dynamic, and one generally has an urge to survive in that area. You can get quite a bit of pleasure from it. The sixth dynamic is the material universe, the planet itself, other planets, your cars, your houses. These things are all the sixth dynamic. But there is an urge to survive as part of that. And then you have the seventh dynamic, and the urge to survive spiritually. Generally, there's a motivation in that area. Sometimes there's not, but as one continues to progress, one reaches out more into these dynamics and arrives at the seventh. And then we arrive at the eighth dynamic, which is the God dynamic, the supreme being, infinity. And generally, or in some cases, there's an urge to survive as part of that dynamic. So it's important to understand that there are 8 of those subdivisions of life, and they're called dynamics. Now, when we talk about right and wrong, we talk about it's not necessarily easily definable for everyone. Now, it varies. Right and wrong varies according to moral codes and disciplines. And what that means is you have a certain moral code in society, such as in our society here, don't steal. If one steals, that's considered wrong. If one harms another individual physically, that's considered wrong. So, and one would not be doing right. If one is at work and they're stealing from their office or something like that, or not really producing, that's not necessarily right either. And one generally doesn't feel well. So you have those disciplines sitting there. Now, before Scientology, despite their use in law as a test of sanity, there was no basis in fact, but only opinion as to what's right or wrong. Now, when I say there was only opinion, one could say, wow, I took it easy at work because they deserved it, or they didn't pay me enough, or, that person that was giving me a hard time, well, I kicked him in the kneecap. He deserved it. Well, that's not necessarily right. However, if you really look at your dynamics, those 8 things I explained to you prior, one would see that doing a harmful action to one of those dynamics would be wrong, or doing something that is not creating survival for one of those dynamics is wrong. So in Dianetics and Scientology, we have a more precise definition. And the definition became, as well, the true definition of an overt act. An overt act is not just injuring someone or something. An overt act is an omission. Like, let's say you're out on your 3rd dynamic and you're saying, well, I don't harm the group and I haven't done anything bad, but Joe over there, he's been stealing, but I don't want to say anything. Well, the fact that you omitted to do something about it, that becomes wrong as well, because you're letting the group fall apart, or you're letting the group be less survival. So whatever does the least good for the least number of dynamics, or the most harm to the greatest number of dynamics, would be considered wrong. And so try and look at your life in terms of those 8 dynamics: self, the family, the marriage, the group, the parents, the children, the groups, mankind, plant and animal kingdom, the physical universe as you see it, the spiritual universe, and God. And so when you're trying to determine for yourself what's right or wrong, look across those dynamics. And if it's doing harm to the greater number of dynamics, it's probably wrong. If it's helping those dynamics to survive, it's probably right. And that would be a good gauge to determine right or wrong. Make sense? I hope so. So there you go. Now, we're open here at the Church of Scientology in Riverdale. And you can come in here and learn more about Dianetics and Scientology, and also more about this book, Introduction to Scientology Ethics. Surprisingly enough, it's not a punishment to work with ethics. I'm going to now read to you the prayer for total freedom. The prayer for total freedom, if followed, would also give you a good gauge on what's right and what's wrong. And because this prayer encompasses the dynamics as I explained them to you. So here we go. May the author of the universe enable all men to reach an understanding of their spiritual nature. That's an interesting point, isn't it? So we want people to reach an understanding of their spiritual nature. Is that right or wrong? You can answer the question yourself. Obviously, it's right. May awareness and understanding of life expand so that all may come to know the author of the universe. Remember, we talked about God and the 8th dynamic, the supreme being infinity. Well, wouldn't it be good to have your awareness come up so you can gain more of an understanding of the author of the universe and infinity and get a hold of it. And this is an interesting point for you personally, and may others also reach this understanding, which brings total freedom. So getting more understanding will give you more total freedom. At this time, we think of those whose liberty is threatened, of those who have suffered imprisonment for their beliefs, of those who are enslaved or martyred, and for all those who are brutalized, trapped, or attacked. See, we're looking at man now, and we're saying, if their liberty is threatened, maybe we should look at that and consider doing something about it. We pray that human rights will be preserved, so that all people may believe and worship freely, so that freedom will once again be seen in our land. That's an important point. So we want others to have that. We want freedom from war and poverty, and freedom to be, freedom to do, and freedom to have. Freedom to use and understand man's potential, a potential that is God-given and God-like. And freedom to achieve that understanding and awareness. That is total freedom. May God let it be so. Thank you for listening to the sermon today, and I invite you to come down and visit us. See you next week.